This is about creativity and gaming, and this is a big topic. There's a lot you could kind of go into here, but I think the way I kind of see it is there's a lot of new technology tools, whether that's the generative AI tools or a lot of this immersive technology, AR, VR stuff, and it's changing kind of everything that we do, and it's changing the ways that we express who we are creatively, and then also kind of the way that we hang out with our friends and the ways that we just have fun kind of in general. So there's a lot to talk about here, and I think we'll kind of dip our toes into a few of those different kind of verticals, but yeah, let's get started.
And the quote that we got from one of y'all that was attending here, which I thought was such a beautiful segue into this, is not just about the technologies, right, but who we are again as humans that walk into this. And so what you were curious about was, will I find the courage to chart my own path in order to share my mind? You should read this.
To share my mind and ideas with the world. Will I ever be truly brave enough to be myself?
Right, and that is at the heart of creativity and being able to jump into this world. So the three panelists that we have has become a little bit more fluid in just the last few minutes. We have Brooke Hopper, who is joining us from Adobe, which is in a really interesting role. Again, when you talk about a role that it literally has emerging in the title of it, you know that it's continuously shifting and changing. We have Erin Reilly right here from UT and is a mentor to Zane. And then unfortunately, Kenny Vaccaro, I think, may have gotten double booked during South by Southwest, which absolutely happens. It is part of the challenge that we have here. Matt Santone was also supposed to be on the panel. He got sick because of something. So, we just roll with it. The good news about being in Austin and being here during South by Southwest is that we have a plethora of people that we can pull from. So we have someone who literally just landed and was going to be here as a mentor, who's going to join us on the panel, my close friend and wonderful person from Microsoft, Mike Pell. So we will have the three of them come join us now. So we have Brooke, Mike, and Erin. So team, the way we have been doing this is we've been inviting you each to, in 7 minutes, which we realize is record time, share with both the folks in the room and via Zoom. We've got several hundred people on Zoom who are curious to know about your career journeys, past, present, and future. So where you sort of started, where you are now, and where it is that you're headed, as sort of just a story about your work and your world. Does that sound good? Sure. Brooke, you want to start? Are you comfortable if we throw you in first?
Hey, I think you did a great introduction. I'm Brooke Hopper. I work for Adobe. I'm on the Machine Intelligence and New Technologies. Such a mouthful. Meant to sort of like generically cover all of the emerging stuff that Adobe does. But I'm the principal designer, and so what I get to do is I get to work with really amazing research scientists every single day, and sort of like take a peek into the future. And the great thing about it is, and I'll get into sort of like my career path right after this, but I think the great thing that I really love about doing what I do is it's literally like, I can imagine any sort of thing that I would want to do, and I have this whole team of research scientists who are there to say like, yeah, it's probably possible if we do this, this, and this, and like, yeah, we can probably do that. And so it's actually really, really amazing. So how did I get to Adobe dreaming about crazy ideas and, shaking my hands and making them reality? I went to school for graphic design. That was my career path. Visual communication. So, right after undergrad, I ended up working at a software firm, oddly enough, even though I had no idea how to design software, because that was the time that it was. But I was doing web design, and this is back when web design was happening in Photoshop, and you have thousands of layers, and no one names them, and then you hand it off to someone else, and they want to kill you because you didn't name anything.
Y'all are going to have so much fun to talk about.
Yeah.
That's true, by the way.
Yeah. So back in the olden days. But it was really great because what it did is it sort of allowed me to really understand sort of like the importance of UX before UX was really, a thing that people focused on. And from there, I actually ended up moving to the Bay Area. My partner at the time got a job with Apple, which was super exciting. And so it was like, yeah, of course, let's move to San Francisco, no questions asked. And from there, I realized that, I really love graphic design. I really want to try out, I sort of want to go backwards. I want to see what it's like to do print and, branding and lay out books and all this other stuff. And I have to say, like, I loved it. I loved the atmosphere. I loved having to sort of just like, very quickly sort of turn things out. And from there, I actually decided that I wanted to go to grad school. So I tried working at agency and going to grad school, would not recommend at all. Both of them are very demanding. But I went to grad school and it was in transdisciplinary design. So I've always loved typography. And my thesis was on something called temporal type, which is a term that I made up. But I was basically looking at sort of like what is the line between legibility and, type becoming like actual art where it's not legible anymore, looking at sort of like semantics and semiotics, a very grad school esoteric thesis. And from there I went to Adobe. And, I have to say I love working and doing what I do because I get to create things for the most creative people in the world. And that is so life-giving. When I was in agencies, there were times that I struggled with working for clients who, maybe I didn't necessarily agree with sort of like the direction the company was going, or, there were sometimes some like, I don't want to say ethical and moral, but like there was things that were bordering on like, do I feel good about this? But you do it because they're a client, they're paying the bills. And I feel like being at a company who really sort of like helps creatives do their best work, that is the most life-giving thing I can do. And quite honestly, it's a huge responsibility. Like it can be very overwhelming because if you, like, I don't want to say you can screw up, but like, like if you are not doing your best work, you're hindering other people from doing their best work. So what was the other part of it? How am I doing on time?
I think Ethan's making sure that we've got much time. But like, where's it headed next? Like, what is on the frontier? Like, what is something you're working on right now?
I mean, I think that we probably don't even have to really even say the term. I think generative AI is something that is taking over everything. My mom, who lives in a tiny town in the mountains of Colorado, knows what generative AI is because, it's all over the news. And she's like, hey, I heard on the news what you're doing. And I was like, okay. I think the thing that I always like to say is there's a lot that surrounds generative AI. But to set the, like, I have a talk tomorrow at South by Southwest, but like to set the record clear, like AI and ML, and I know you can attest to this, they've been around forever. This is nothing new. Content-aware fill or content-aware scale in Photoshop, I always like to give those examples. That's AI and ML. The generative stuff is new, but what I do think is, I feel like right now there's a lot of artists, particularly illustrators, who feel like it's a little bit doom and gloom. Am I going to have a career? What's happening? Am I going to be relevant? This is what I think. I think that we are at the forefront of this technology. It is not going away. We have an opportunity as artists and designers to sort of step in and step up and make a difference and make an impact in the direction it's going. And we have seen some of that already, actually, with Clip Studio and I'm totally blanking on the other, there's a few other platforms that had sort of like the no AI. They're listening. Artists have an opportunity to have their voice heard. And I think that we can influence this for good. And I think it's something that we shouldn't be worried about. I think things are going to level out, and I don't think that humans are going to be taken away from any sort of creative, because we're all creative at the core. So, message of optimism.
What's your panel title here?
It's not a panel, it's just a talk. It's Infinity and Beyond, Designing the Future. So it's tomorrow at 11:30 at the Marriott.
We'll talk more about that one.
Oh,
yeah, I was
cool.
going to say, that one's fascinating. All right. Mike, that's a perfect segue into your work and your world. And you've been at Microsoft a long time, but again, in different roles and evolved with the different waves of technology and curiosity. So where are you now?
So, well, first of all, I'll say I agree with everything that Brooke said. We have a lot of opportunities to influence what's about to happen, not be victims of the machine taking over. It's not going to happen that way. So, hi, welcome. I'm Mike Pell. I work for Microsoft. I like to say I'm from the future. A lot of my work, I know everybody always laughs, but it's true. A lot of my work has been doing future work, like vision stuff. It's not because I want it to be that way. It's just how I think. So typically, I'll give you some advice, career advice. Don't be too early. It's not going to help anything. Be on time. That's a much better career path. But the stuff that I do at Microsoft now is I lead something called the Microsoft Garage in New York City, which is a worldwide program for innovation that lets our employees take their passion and their ideas and go do something with it. It's not an incubator, it's not an accelerator. It's really just a program that gives people a mechanism, an opportunity to go out and try things that are not in their backlog, that are not part of their day job. It's very exciting to be part of that because a lot of companies do not give you the opportunity to express yourself in that way. My team, The Garage, runs the world's biggest hackathon for the last 9 years. We had over 70,000 employees worldwide join us last year. And it was the best day of their working career because they got to do what they care about. And this is everything from working on ideas for new technologies, but it's more about helping your community, helping the things and the people that you really want to help. And so I'm very, very fortunate to have done that. I had a long career path. It's very, very interesting. I'll try to shorten it, like keep it very brief. I went to school many years ago to study art. I was a gifted artist in high school. My art teacher wanted me to go to RISD, right, the Rhode Island School of Design. I grew up on the East Coast. I was like, I'm not staying on the East Coast, forget it. I'm going to sunny Tucson, Arizona. That's where I'm going. So I went there to study fine art. I had my very first class and I realized my high school art teacher didn't teach me a thing about foundational mechanics. So there's no way I was going to last in this program. So back then, there was this new thing, personal computers, and I thought, well, I should try this out. I love science fiction. I always loved technology. I love like the Apollo program. And so I thought, wow, I'm going to give this a try, and I liked it. And I've been very, very fortunate that for my entire career, I've been able to keep my design and creative side along with an engineering and more technical side and combine them together. So as part of my advice to you about career and like what you want to do, don't ever let anybody tell you that you can only be one thing. You can be as many things as you want. I've made a career out of that. I'm sure like all of us have had an opportunity to do that. You do not have to sit in the little box that they would like you to sit in. It's better to be a rebel and a maverick and someone who wants to go do their own thing. It's hard because corporate America.
The system isn't currently designed to support that.
That's correct. It is like a lot of college programs are now integrating design and engineering and business so that you come out a little bit more well-rounded, and corporations and even startups are starting to understand how to utilize people with lots of different skills who have interests in different areas, but it wasn't like that back then. So I had to learn the hard way. But through my career, I've done a lot of interesting things. I invented what is now known as the font menu. Like when you click on the font menu and you see what the fonts look like, it wasn't like that when the computer first came out. It was all the same font, Chicago, and you had to try them out and see them and go like, that's not right, that's not right. It was ridiculous. So I hacked the system, built the font menu. Many years later, I actually joined Adobe, invented Acrobat and PDF with some friends of mine. I literally hacked together the very first PDF file. It was a hack. It was just like we took a bunch of Illustrator files, put them together, fed them into a hacked up display PostScript interpreter, and out popped this page. So that was pretty fun.
We're very grateful to you.
Well, so it's funny, right? This was one of those things where John Warnock, who was the CEO of Adobe at that time, had this crazy idea that you could take a document from one computer, like a Linux computer or a Mac or a PC, and interchange them. And that was crazy thinking back then. That was like ridiculous. Like you can't do that, it's impossible. But he knew that if we could do it, people could actually have their well-crafted documents show up right, because they didn't show up looking right at all. And so we hacked together this incredible prototype, turned into a multi-billion-dollar business for Adobe, and changed the world of business. So there is always that kind of thing. And I have another story as I sort of fast forward to Microsoft. We, many years ago, and this is no secret, Microsoft didn't know how to cooperate with itself, right? Like we were in silos, meaning every different division and group within the company didn't like working with each other. They were competitive. They didn't know how to sort of actually even trust each other. So about 9 years ago, we got a new CEO named Satya Nadella. Satya had been a longtime Microsoft guy. He couldn't stand that the culture of the company was so fractured and dysfunctional. And so he asked a small group of people, the Garage team, that I was part of, to figure out how to go run a global hackathon, to just let everybody do whatever they wanted for a week, because he wanted to see what would happen. Like, would anything good come out of it? What came out of it was we actually changed the culture of the company. Didn't happen overnight, but what happened was people realized that by cooperating and by finding people to collaborate with, they were going to get a lot more done. So instead of being competitive and not trusting people and pushing people away, we sort of got the idea of being more cooperative, into the, like sort of the water. And that changed everything about working at Microsoft. I think if you ask anybody, to the person, they will tell you that the company is very, very different now. So another, thing about careers.
Can I just jump in?
Yeah.
The thing that was so cool about the hackathon too was that it wasn't just the engineers, the designers that were invited to the hackathon. It was people in accounting, it was people in talent and HR, it was people in supply chain and logistics, right? It was anybody who had an idea about how to improve the system in some way.
Yep.
Instead of sitting around complaining about it, we're invited to come and do something about it.
Yeah.
Right? That I think was the big shift.
Yeah.
That we point to a lot to other organizations about how to change culture.
Yeah, that was absolutely critical, Nancy. Yeah, thank you for bringing that up. Hackathon was for everybody and still is. By the way, if you hear the term hackathon, you should not automatically think that it's code-based. It doesn't have to be. We do things all the time that are just about people learning how to do something quickly. They're growing as people, right? They're developing new skills, figuring out new things to do. So it's not always, I always tell people, it's not about the thousands and thousands and thousands of projects that get created, that sort of come out the other end of this activity. It's about the people, showing the people that there's a mechanism that we can listen to them, they can take their passion and do something with it, and we always are going to get re-energized employees at the end of all this, so it's good for us. And so just to answer really quickly about what's next, so I've learned so much at Microsoft over the last 20 years. I've written a few books that are really sort of told from the future. The one I'm finishing right now is called Visualizing Business, which is sort of what's next after this whole generative AI and ChatGPT. But it'll be a lot of fun. It helps finally people to see and to understand how business works. Businesses are living, chaotic, breathing things, but yet they're always displayed and portrayed as static, graphs and charts and spreadsheets. They are nothing like that, right? We all know that. And so finally, there's a new visual language and a mechanism to be able to see how these things work. Ooh. So that's what's next.
And when is that out?
That'll be out in the first week of May. It's on pre-order this weekend at South by.
All right, good. So again, this is what I love about this week, right, is that we get to touch the future so tangibly here and be on the right edge of it. All right, well, if you and Erin had a digital child, it would have been Zane. But it fits perfectly with, I know that you spent a little time and Zane hasn't fully taken advantage of the mentorship that you have potentially made available to him yet. But Erin has filled the gap right now. And so Erin, tell us about what your work is here at.
Yeah, sure. So I loved both of your stories, and it definitely speaks a lot to the story and the trajectory that I've been on. But I have to bring us back to the quote that you started this with, that the student shared with you. It was like, how can I truly be me? I feel like that's how I've lived my life. My parents always taught me to your own self be true. And one of my friend's kids a long time ago literally labeled me the kidult in the family, right? So that pretty much sums me up, if you know me. I've been someone who's studied and really explored play for over 25 years, my whole career. And the way I think about play is in two ways. One is that it's the ability to experiment with your surroundings as a form of problem solving. And it also means participatory learning in you. So at the heart of who I am, I'm a professor, I'm an educator. But in regards to what I've done with my career, the way I started my career was as an entrepreneur, really thinking about kids in digital media in the first .com boom. I was getting my MFA, and I was at a film school, and I was the only female in my program, and my mentors told me that I could not be a director. that the program was really like females should be producers. Well, fuck that. So
a sanctioned word at the Careers for the Future event.
so I instead kind of flipped the script and said, oh, well, I'll start working in the internet because they don't know what that is, and that's the future of media. So I started developing a program for girls, for middle school girls, to creatively engage them in STEM, to really encourage them through arts in STEM. That was before even STEAM was a word. And I built the largest female repository of women in these fields to come on and creatively engage them through an animated character and through webisodes in early days. So, you know, always kind of beat your own, like kind of blaze your own trail. I was a small fish in a, or a, what is that, like small fish in a, or big fish in a small pond. I was living in Maine at the time. I always get those wrong, don't I? Anyway, Angus King was the governor. He's a senator now, but he was the first to do a one-to-one laptop initiative. And I went to him, knocked on his door and said, I'm gonna create your whole digital program for your laptop initiative. So my program blew up very fast, and it went national within 3 months, it went international within 6 months, and then I ran it for a really long time until MIT started paying attention. Because they started realizing that digital media and learning was where kids were learning, was where everyone was kind of moving towards. So I went and ran a lab at MIT, and it was a sister lab to the Media Lab. So where media, the Media Lab is really known for like the future of technology, always thinking 20 years out, our program was really helping people think of the careers that don't exist yet. We were going in and working with them and saying, well, how would humans actually use that tool? You know, what would actually, how would that work? So early days thinking about experience design, which is now just a common term that we all need. So that kind of put me on the trajectory of being in academia 20 years ago. And since then, I feel like I've been at Tech Mecca at MIT and Media Mecca at USC, where I ran and founded an innovation lab there. And then UT recruited me here. And I loved coming to Austin because it was the convergence of media and tech. It was literally this kind of blend of everything I was trying to do in my career. Throughout the time, I've been a consultant with all of the top companies, Microsoft, Disney, a lot of consulting firms like PwC and Ipsos. And now where I'm at now is I came in as head of innovation and entrepreneurship for this college to really shake things up. I think that's kind of where I sit, is to really mess up what teaching and learning looks like. I hope my classroom is every day a hackathon or some sort of build fest to question the future. And now I run Texas Immersive Institute, which is really helping prepare students for those jobs that don't exist, for really thinking about this move into the metaverse and Web3, and kind of the future of the internet, where I first began my career. Some of the things I'm excited about that I'm building is I'm definitely playing around with AI. I'm actually building a virtual friend, really exploring the social and emotional connection that you can have with GPT-3 in a whole virtual world. And we've done a lot with augmented reality. We've done a lot with virtual worlds. We're building immersive experiences that blend the physical and digital, which comes full circle to why they brought me to MIT. Is like I came up with this term called Siphibian theory. This is what I literally walked in and they're like, so what do you think about? I'm like, I have this theory. It's called the Siphibian theory. You know how like amphibians live on land and water? Like that's us. We live between these worlds, digital and physical, and everything is going to be a merger of those in the future. And here we are today, actually doing that.
Well, we have a physical event and a virtual event.
Exactly.
At the same time. So.
And we will try and figure out how to make it more immersive in a moment when we actually engage students in some of this stuff too. But Zane, you're in Erin's world all day long, so what are some questions you have for this amazing group of people?
I mean, I get to ask Erin questions all the time.
Yes.
I know, but I mean, you get Mike and Brooke. So I think what's so fascinating is to see that all three of you are playing in a world, but from slightly different perspectives, right? But you are literally shaping the experiences and the tools and the way in which we're going to be able to express ourselves, right across this range here, right?
So I can say, having been in the industry for a very long time, I'm just blown away by both of you. Like hearing your backstories. Like I know Nancy like very well, but you have been right at the heart of all this. Like you're responsible for a really big thing right now at Adobe, right?
Yeah.
You're shaking up this whole university.
Thank God.
But what is our students? Oh, sorry, go ahead.
Oh, I was going to say, I want to kind of add on to that. You know, I think a lot of times you hear stories like these, like I'm listening to both of your stories and I'm like, wow, they like really know what they're doing. No one knows what the hell they're doing. Like, no, like you're just like, you're taking like, I would say like career is just one entire sort of like exploratory thesis. You're just like finding little strings and you're like pulling them until, you know, they don't make sense anymore. And sometimes they, you know, open up really big things and sometimes they don't. So you start following the next string. There's no math or science or anything to this. It's literally just, I mean, I hate to say it because people roll their eyes. My husband is a researcher and I was like, it's intuition. Like you follow it and you go with it and it leads you to some pretty great things.
But I do think it's those turns, right? It's like when you decide to go back to grad school or when you decided that this program didn't, I think that thing that we said when you run out of energy in that thread, right? That's, I think, the thing to pay attention to and then to be curious about what the next thing is that you want to learn more about. Because I think that's what guided certainly my career is where I get frustrated about something and then I want to go create the thing that takes me out of that frustration.
Yeah, when you're bored, man, leave.
Right?
Yeah.
Seriously.
Or you're not heard at all, then you figure out a way around it. Like I think it's so interesting when you talk about your program, right? When they were saying no women aren't directors. And you can keep pushing against it, or you can do this sort of end round, right? When you go to the next thing, which I think is fascinating. And you've done that actually at Microsoft, right? You were in one area and ended up in another.
Yeah, no, it's amazing how many times people come to you and go, we should do this thing, and they walk out, and you're sitting there going, okay, all right, let's figure out how to do that. Don't be afraid, right, of going off and actually failing. I don't like to romanticize failure at all. I can't stand when people say fail fast. I can't stand that phrase. I can't stand it because I don't think anybody wants to fail. I think you learn when you fail and you have to try, but it's better to just sort of be willing to have things not turn out because they're not going to turn out very often. Just try it. Just go figure it out.
Are your students prepared for this future that we're all shaping here for? Like, meaning not the ones obviously that have been in your classroom, but as they walk in.
I would say the ones that, Texas Immersive actually pulls students from across the campus. So we try replicating what it's like to work, with, you're not working with always your same discipline. So we have 13 majors represented in the program. And I think one of the biggest skills they learn is how to work together, how to work collaboratively, how to foster collective intelligence where they're pooling their knowledge towards a common goal, that they don't have to be an expert of everything, but to know that their expertise matters and they're contributing to this bigger purpose, I think it prepares them better for where they're going.
So I've finished the Texas Immersive program, and I'm kind of in more of a leadership role now. And I think I interact with a lot of the students, and I kind of have a pulse on the organization. And I think something that's really consistent is, in any organization, I think there's probably students that are better prepared for the future than others, or kind of just more prepared for the rigors of the workforce. But I think what's interesting is that the students who I think are set up for success, there's no correlation between their majors or their skill sets even. It's not about what they do or what they're passionate about. It's that they are passionate about something and they have that twinkle in their eye when you talk about it and they're saying, I'm going to do this thing. And it doesn't matter where on the spectrum they fall as far as what they actually want to do. It's just whether or not they're willing to just do it. And I think that's something I've kind of consistently seen as students come through the program.
And that's what we look for too, exactly what you just said, Zane, is we want people who are curious. Like, you have to be curious, right? You won't get anywhere in a Microsoft interview if you're not naturally curious. Mm-hmm. We don't want people who have the highest GPAs or whatever, but we want you to be passionate and curious. And the passion comes from doing things that are not just in your curriculum, that are outside, like whether it's, going off and hacking on something or like doing whatever you're doing, like helping the community. Don't just do your schoolwork. Go off and find new things to apply your passion to. That matters a lot when you go off into your career.
Well, I think that the thing that unites creatives is that we don't just go from the brief. I'm not saying I'm always like a shadow creative, right? But the idea is that you're not someone's just handing you the playbook and you go, yes, that's it, and you just execute it really well. It's really about being able to question that. And when you see that there's something that's not working, you figure out, again, how to build a solution and don't assume that it's somebody else's job to do. Like, people see problems all day long, but they assume it's somebody else's work to sort them out. And I think what really unites a creative mindset, if you will, is a desire to want to go at the problem, as opposed to not. And so I think that the question is whether or not students have been raised that way in a world in which right now it is so much about the rubric and about the AP score or about trying to get into the right school or right that, So I think that what's really interesting to see in your organizations, and Brooke, I don't know how it's going at Adobe, have you guys opened up recruiting in a different way? Like, do you look at students differently or entry-level candidates differently, do you think?
Yeah, I mean, I feel like there used to be this sort of like set of requirements when you were hiring, like they must have this. I just hired an intern last year who has zero experience with any Adobe tools, which I think is great personally. And she's amazing because she can come in and she can flip stuff on its head and look at it, a million different ways.
So what do you look for in candidates?
Curiosity and hunger. I mean, like, I think to what everyone has said up here already, like, I'm not interested in someone who's a rule follower. I want someone who's gonna, like, quite honestly, like, be a little bit of a pain in my ass. Like, they're gonna, like, wanna, like, go some direction and I might get annoyed and be like, come on, like, we have to ship this thing. And, they're like, but I want to explore this. And, like, it ends up being great. And, like, that's the type of people that I personally love working with. Yeah, I don't know if anyone else has.
I look for students to come into the program. I look that they're not afraid of the blank page, which I think is really important because they've already been given so many rules and guidelines that sometimes you just like open the door for them and see where they go, what they can do.
Even ChatGPT, though, the first time I played on it, I was like, I don't know what to ask it. Like, I was so intimidated by, like, what does one ask a computer to do, right? And first we had to write a haiku, which wasn't quite accurate, actually, and then do some vacation planning. But I think that what's so interesting is watching Zane play with this and have so much more fluidity and so much more confidence in just, like, having a conversation with the computer. Or someone described to me that those that will really succeed in the future know how to talk to a computer, right? So what is your experience with that?
Well, and I think this is kind of speaking to a lot of what we're talking about here, where it's not like I was like, oh, this is the future. I need to learn how to do this. This is the future. I'm going to learn this skill set because it'll be good for my getting a job. And I was just like, oh my God, this is insane. What can I do with it? How can this augment all of the things that I'm already passionate about? Like, I like writing these kinds of articles. I love talking about things in this kind of way. How can I use this tool to leverage what I'm already doing? And then next thing you know, I'm staying up till 5 a.m, writing some, article using it, and it's like using AI images, and it's like, next thing you know, it's, the sun's rising, and I've created this thing using these tools. And it's never like I sought out to learn. The learning kind of came after I just said, I'm curious about this thing. What can I do with it?
Yeah, so in a nutshell, Zane created an article and an interview with an artist around a conceptual piece of interactive art called Weight of Possession, in which the artist doesn't exist. The interview was created in a conversation with ChatGPT, who made up all the meaning around it, and I think even named the art, right?
Yeah, so there's a bunch of images of the exhibit that were generated using AI, and then there is a interview that I did with the artist that was generated by I asked the questions, but the artist responded. And I wrote a whole write-up about what it was like to visit it and all the emotions that it gave me and stuff. And this is maybe not some super groundbreaking thing, but the whole thing that I was exploring there, which was, okay, we have these generative AI tools. They are like, this art exhibit, for all intents and purposes, does exist now. There are photos of it, and there's an interview with the artist about it, and there's a description and review of what it's like to visit it. Like, that's as real as 99% of the installations that exist in the world to the average person. So that was kind of what I was kind of playing with there. But it really just came down to, can I almost create something? Can I invent something just by writing about it? And
or asking it.
asking questions. But it's never like I sought out to do this because I wanted to then apply for this job.
I just thought it was a cool thing. I think people always wonder how far you
did it during the holiday, so you don't see it's about passion. It's about finding your passion, giving yourself the curiosity to go down that rabbit hole, whatever it takes, and maybe ignore all the other things you're supposed to do just to keep focused and get it, which you do quite regularly. Stay focused on that one thing.
By the way, that was a big deal.
Yeah.
That was super creative to be able to do that, because it's a new field. Like we don't, like, except in fiction writing, like people don't do that.
But even then, they have to have the answer, right? He asked ChatGPT the question, and he let them, let it, whatever it is, the noun we use for that, pronoun, answer back, and then accept those answers. So it was like when you're a fiction...
I think it's an it still.
But yeah, the idea is that as a nonfiction writer, you write both sides of the conversation. Here, you're writing one side of the conversation, and you're letting the computer write the other half. And I think that's the partnership that is so fascinating as we move into this world of creativity. Okay, so we could talk about this forever, obviously. Yeah. We love hanging out.
Back to so we mentioned collaboration, right?
Yeah.
It's really important for people to learn how to collaborate. So we used to run an internship in the garage for many, many years. And we had some of the top students come in from all over the country, and what would they do? Immediately, they would want to work on things themselves because they were super competitive. And we had to tell them, like, you are never going to survive this program without learning how to work with each other. Mm-hmm. You have to learn how to work with each other. You have to depend on people. You have to be willing to actually put yourself out there and teach people things that they don't know. That's like, there's nothing more important, because now, like, we're still working in a hybrid world, and who knows how long this is going to go on for, maybe forever. You have to be good at collaborating with other people.
Yeah, but that quote that we had at the very beginning about I have the courage to be myself, I think that's the hardest part. I think it's easier for operating people to work in a more collaborative way than it is sometimes for creative people to work in a collaborative way, because your work is so personal, right? And you're still like on a boundary that is like so new to you, and you're not quite sure that you're really confident in it yet. Like, I don't know, has collaboration come easily to you?
Yeah, I mean, I love it. One of the talks that I pitched for the South by talk was actually like engineers being creative partners, because that's my number one pet peeve that I see designers do, is they're like, well, I know how to design this thing, and I'm going to do this, and then I'm going to pass it over to the engineers, and they're going to make it. That is bullshit. I'm just going to say that. Like, engineers are some of the best creative partners and some of the most creative people that I work with, far and above and beyond designers. And I think that if there is one thing that you do, I would say, like, never sort of like decide that because that person, to what we said earlier, because someone doesn't have design in their title or artist or whatever, that does not mean that they are, not a great person to collaborate with or design with.
Or that if you're in that role, like if you're a data scientist or if you're in bioengineering, you are a creative person.
Yeah,
right?
like super creative problem solvers, right?
Yeah.
Like that's what engineers do all day, is they solve problems. I've found that in my career as well. So I found that the people who would test software back in the old days were some of the most creative, incredibly brilliant people you would ever find, because they were empathetic. They were trying to look at how people would use these things that the engineers were just trying to make work, and sort of ignoring the whole experiential design part of it. So definitely cross-disciplinary, collaborative, and super passionate creative.
I'd also say, like, just to wrap it up, own your power. I think that sometimes you're like, oh, I'm new and I'm the young person, I'm a student coming out there. Are they going to really want to listen to me? Be loud and be bold. Because I think you guys should have a voice. I don't think Texas Immersive would not be where it's at today if I didn't just let the young adults take over, and be loud and be bold. Majority of what we've done is because of the students. So, own that.
I will say, and just be patient if you haven't gotten that. I was able to give a big keynote talk earlier this week to 1,200 tech people as part of Samsung. And the question I always get asked is, how do we reduce complexity and how do we improve simplicity? And I just ask the youngest people on your team. Right? If you ask the youngest people on your team, you'll move that much faster, but many organizations don't have that muscle in place yet. And so you can be bold, you can be brash, but that's also frustrating. But it's the world's catching up. My point is, be curious, let people know that you've got ideas, and eventually they'll catch up to asking for that. Brooke, what do you most love to talk about?
Oh my God, anything creative. You can tell, I always have people tell me, you can tell when I'm excited because I get super pumped and everyone around me is required to get excited about the same thing. But I found this very effective. I mean, there's no rhyme or reason to what I get excited about, I have to say.
Okay, good. All right, well, that shows you that the game on.